Welcome to Talking Early Years, a showcase training podcast with Ellen Roberts
and Gemma Carr.
Hello and welcome to today's Talking Early Years podcast. On this episode, we're going to be discussing everything sleep for young children, and we have our special guest today, Megan Warren from Little Merles. So Megan, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, so I run and I own Little Merles Childcare Services, which is, I sort of run a nannying side of the business, and then I'm also a sleep consultant. I've had previous experiences in nurseries with nannying, night nannying, and yeah, that's what led me into being a sleep consultant.
So what are some of the most common questions on a sleep capacity that parents ask you or families ask you when they come to you wanting sleep consultancy advice?
So I think there's definitely a range of questions that can be asked. I think probably two of the most common ones I get asked is obviously, does it work? And then secondly, about the cry it out method. So do I use the cry it out method? In which I don't. It's not something I trained in. It's not something I believe in. And just for the sort of the developmental and the emotional side with children, it's not something that I would promote myself. And then in respect of does it work? It certainly does if you can be consistent with it. If you're committed to it as well, that is a big part of sleep training, is if you're ready for it and if you're ready to commit to a plan. But definitely with that, it does work. It's a bit like, I sort of describe it to clients as it's a bit like a diet. So like when you want to go on a diet, you obviously have to put some hard work and a bit of consistency into it as well. And it's a bit like that with sort of sleep training. If you're ready to put the work into it and be consistent with it, then you'll certainly get the results that you're looking for.
Do you often do you have more parents who come to you sort of in a frazzled state, or is it kind of preempting the want to sleep train and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I kind of get a mixture. Like I have some parents that come to me that are ready to do some sleep training, but they're not quite sure maybe what that entails or what sort of comes with sleep training, what it even is as such. And then there is some clients that I suppose are on the fence is the way I would put it, that they know they want to do some sort of sleep training, but they're not quite sure what that kind of entails or what it means. So there's different sort of ends, I guess, of the spectrum of what people are looking for. Some people generally you can have a call with and they're not even really sure what they're going to get out of the call. And then they come to you as clients after sort of having a conversation and knowing what comes with it. So yeah, it's a mixture of people, of what they're sort of where they are in their life with what they want to do.
Yeah. And what age ranges do you work with, Megan? Is it just early years, or does it kind of go into slightly older children or school age as well?
So I myself work with sort of 6 months, anywhere I guess between 4 to around 4 years old. So 4 months to around 4 years old. So that it's quite a broad age range. There's other people that will work with older children, and again some people that will work with children that have got sort of special needs as such, like ADHD. There's a different kind of sleep training methods for that kind of situation, but I specifically work with children between sort of 4 months to 4 years, so those kind of earlier years as such.
So what does, as a sleep consultant and having worked in nurseries, support for settings, how would you promote safe sleeping in nursery settings?
So I think from a previous experience, I know when I worked in a nursery, I didn't have much sort of knowledge on safe sleep, but my sort of main ones would be obviously you lay baby on the back. Most children in nurseries do tend to roll, but my advice, as I would to any client, would be to not continuously. If they roll onto their front, you don't need to then roll them back onto their back. And then in a nursery setting, like having sort of your firm, flat, clear mattresses, You're checking your room temperature so that they're anywhere between 16 to 20 degrees. And then appropriate sleepwear for children as well, whether that's provided from the parents when they start at the nursery, or whether that's something that the nursery provides themselves. But it would be, appropriate sleepwear in respect of not having blankets or anything that cover children's faces or that they could cause any sort of choking hazards. And if they're under the age of 1, not to have any type of blanket within their sort of sleep environment or sleep area. And then to be obviously making sleep checks for the practitioners to be doing sleep checks on the children. I know when I worked in a nursery, there would be a sort of system of you would check every 10 minutes on the children, and you would have to write onto a sheet and record all the sort of sleep checks, as they say. And then obviously monitoring of the children. So
some settings do it differently as well. I know some settings that I've worked for, some settings you have to have a practitioner in the room with the children, and that's a case that they would be sat doing observations or paperwork or things like that, but there is always a person in the room. Or it's a case, like you said, they're going in and doing those checks, popping their head in, making sure that, or checking the child, actually checking the child as well, not just everyone's still in the room. Obviously every child is still in the room, the door shut, but checking that every child is still breathing and going to each child individually. So that's all dependent on the settings, policies and procedures as well. So that can be differing a little bit, can't it?
Yeah, it's certainly. And I think there's a big thing, certainly in respect of safe sleep. They say to keep your sleep area, so your cot or your bed, completely clear. So that would mean sort of no comforters, no cot bumpers or anything like that, which can, especially in a nursery environment, I think you could come across some troubles with that, especially with younger children that might bring a comforter in that they use to sleep with. So there can be some sort of challenges and tricky bits where actually, some children sleep with a comforter and that's what will help them within a nursery setting, but that not necessarily sort of safe sleep advice, as they say.
What are your kind of top, I suppose quite difficult to put it into a list really, but sort of a top 5 safe sleep practices? So you mentioned there about having a clear sleeping sort of environment, so making sure that there is nothing there, no teddies and that kind of thing. What other kind of things, what does that safe sleep to you mean?
So I think safe sleep for me would be things like not having a comforter necessarily in the cot. Obviously, as children get older, they do become attached to one particular toy or cuddly or something like that they do take to bed. And I sort of always do promote that, if that helps them to go to bed, then great, do have that in there as much as it's sort of your safe sleep advice, as long as there's no risk potentially of them sort of strangling themselves or suffocating on it. Then actually, if that helps them to sleep, there isn't anything to suggest that they can't have it. It's just the advice that is given out. But I think my top 5 would definitely be no sort of cot bumpers, anything around the cot that will cause any sort of strangulation or the child to get sort of caught in or hurt in. But especially with younger children, so sort of to promote with SIDS, to have them on their back. Obviously, children do learn to roll. So once they learn to roll, you don't need to keep going back in and then rolling them back onto their back. As long as they aren't sort of caught in their cot or anything like that, then they are absolutely fine to sort of sleep on their front. But they initially should be put down onto their back. The room temperature is a tricky one with children. Some children prefer a room slightly warmer, some prefer a room slightly colder. Again, it's all promoted around SIDS and reducing the risk of SIDS, but it can be really quite tricky. So as I said, some prefer it warmer, some prefer it colder, but I think if you've got a room anywhere between that 16 to 20 degrees, then you're in a safe range. And again, with sleepwear, so appropriate sleepwear, making sure that they are in sleeping bags, or if you are using duvets and blankets, that they aren't being covered over their head. They do say not to use any sort of pillow, duvet or blanket with a child that's under the age of 1. So I think that would be my top sort of 5 definite safe sleep advice.
Nice. So what are your views on co-sleeping? Is there an age when a child should be moved into their own bed? What are the positives or the negatives on co-sleeping?
So I think it's a very controversial subject, co-sleeping. You can see, there's so much sort of on the internet, social media, that yes, you should co-sleep, or no, you shouldn't co-sleep. And there's some families and parents that I've worked with that it's almost been a bit of a secret that they kind of co-sleep, because they don't want the views of other parents, or that you're doing it wrong, you shouldn't do that, it's not right. I am very much a believer of, if it's right for you, then that's great. If you're happy co-sleeping and it's part of your sort of parenting style, your views, your beliefs, and you're happy to do it, then that's great. If you're not, and you're not happy doing it, then that's maybe where you need to look at coming away from it, or finding some sort of support that can help you with it. But I think it's a big subject that can be I could talk to you for hours about it. But I'm very much a believer of, if it's working for you, then fantastic, carry on. If it's not, then look at sort of finding some sort of solutions to come away from it. I often find, especially within sort of my job role, that actually often parents don't intentionally want to co-sleep. They end up doing it through sort of sleep exhaustion and just being generally absolutely shattered. That it's the easiest way as such to be able to get some more sleep. So bringing your child into your bed, it's the easy way to get some sleep of an evening or of a night time. So often I do find that some parents don't initially start out co-sleeping, but actually after doing night feeds, or you've been up sort of 5-6 times an evening, that actually just to get some sleep, a lot of parents will bring the child into their bed to then be able to get some more sleep for themselves. So it's not initially something they start out wanting to do, but end up doing out of sort of choice and survival, I suppose is the way I would.
Desperation.
Out of just being able to get a few hours sleep. If you can put your child into bed and know that they'll go back to sleep quite quickly, or you'll get another 3 hours sleep or something, that actually they will do that out of being able to sort of get sleep as such. I think I'm very much, especially within the sort of sleep consultancy world, I do work with families that do co-sleep. I do work with them in respect of building routines around that, coming away from co-sleeping if that's something they want to do. It's very much, I will respect the parents' decision. If they want to co-sleep, that's something I can work with. It's not a case of, because you co-sleep, I can't work with you, or we can't sleep train. Generally, co-sleeping, I think in a sleep consultancy world, it can be more trickier to do some kind of sleep training with a child that is co-sleeping, but it's not something that you can't do.
So on co-sleeping, would you kind of say that if you are still adhering to safe sleep routines, and like you've kind of said, without the duvets, the blankets, the everything else, it's still a safe environment for children to sleep, and sort of with automatically I kind of think of alcohol and drugs as well, obviously, so not having parents who have been drinking that evening or taking drugs, those kind of things as well. So as long as those aren't a factor, it can still be a safe way to sleep.
So there's definitely some risks that you, obviously, if you have been doing certain things, you shouldn't be co-sleeping. So things like smoking, taking drugs, any kind of medication that can make you drowsy. You wouldn't be safe to do safe sort of co-sleeping and safe sleeping with the child. If your child was born premature, so anything before 37 weeks, or with a birth weight that was lower than 5.5 pounds, I think it is, you shouldn't co-sleep as well. And then it can actually increase the risk to SIDS, more so when you're co-sleeping as well. It's a very tricky one. I think if you're sticking to your safe sleep advice in respect to co-sleeping, it's different to sort of sleeping a child in your bedroom in their own sort of safe sleep space. It's two different sleep advices. But if you are sort of sticking with the sleep advice that they provide for co-sleeping, then potentially shouldn't be any risks. You obviously can't guarantee that. And then there is also different things in respect of two adults in a bed with a baby. I've heard the stories in the news, the horror stories that you do hear about a partner is rolled onto the baby, or the baby's suffocated, even down to sort of breastfeeding at night. Mum's dropped off to sleep and then baby's been suffocated on the breast. So it's I think you do what you have to do and you should do to prevent that. But it's a very fine line in respect of if you're co-sleeping with safe sleep advice.
What are wake windows?
So it's a subject, again, another subject that people can get really confused on. So a wake window is a period of time that your child will be tired enough to then fall asleep at their next sleep. So it's not a fixed amount of time. So, for example, it could be 4 to 6 hour wake windows. So anywhere between those 4 to 6 hours, your child will be tired enough to then go down for their next sleep. It's not a window where at 4 hours my child is going to be 100% ready to go for sleep, or 6 hours they're going to be 100% ready to go down for their nap. It's a period of time between those hours that they will display signs to show that they're tired enough to go down for a sleep.
It's very interesting that you say that, because that is a very common misconception, isn't it? Right, my child's been awake for 4 hours, I now need to put them back in their cot. And it's that child may not, be rubbing their eyes, may not be kind of gurgling ready for bed, all those kind of things. But it's been 4 hours. They said 4 hours, so I've got to put them back down. And that's not what happens, sort of thing. So thinking about wake windows, how can nurseries work with those? Is there a way that nurseries can work with those?
I think it's certainly working in a nursery, sort of teaching practitioners about wake windows. As you said, Gemma, a lot of people will get confused on what a wake window is and be like, well, like you said, at 4 hours, this child needs to go to sleep. It's between that say, for example, 4 to 6 hours that they're tired enough. So I think it's promoting wake windows to practitioners and parents and staff members on how that they can work with the parents to promote that. Some parents absolutely love working with wake windows, and it gives them structure throughout the day. It gives them a bit more of a routine, and it's a bit more predictable. Some children, everybody has a wake window, but some children won't necessarily work to a wake window. So again, some children's wake window may be longer than others, which can be tricky to work with, I guess, in a respect of a nursery setting. I think it would be great for nurseries and practitioners to be aware of a wake window and working with the parents. So if you've got some parents that would say to you, they normally fall asleep between 2 to 4 hours, that practitioner or that nursery is then aware of that and building a routine and a relationship with the parents to best build that sort of routine for the child. And again, for nursery staff, making sure that sort of, if they're aware of a wake window, it could mean that some children aren't coming to a point where they're overtired or they're undertired, or they're being put down for a sleep too early and then, laying in the cot wide awake and things like that. So I think it could be very beneficial for nurseries to know more about wake windows.
It might be a bit of a silly question, but opposite to kind of wake windows, is there like a sleep window? So should children be asleep for a certain length of time? I've heard of people sort of waking children up after a certain length of time, or do they just sleep for however long they need to?
So there's definitely, again, like your average sleep needs to age brackets. So for example, a 4 to 6 month should have a certain amount of hours in the day and a certain amount of hours at night. Again, it can be very hard. Every child is unique. Every child is different. Some children have really high sleep needs. Some children have really low sleep needs. So it can be hard, I think, to know exactly what your child needs as such. So there is definitely an average of what you should, like what each child of an age range should be averaging in a day. But every child can be different.
So thinking about the wake windows, and you said about sort of the signs of child being ready to go to bed, what would you say typically are like we've sort of done already, the 5 signs of a child being ready to go to bed kind of thing, what would you be looking for?
Okay, so on this one, everyone will often think that a child yawning is a sign that they're tired. That actually is one of the last signs that a child will show you before they're tired. So generally, if they're yawning, they're ready for a sleep. If not, they're getting to a point where they're overtired. Generally, it's things, so their eyebrows will often go sort of a slightly redder colour. They may fixate on something or stare out into a space. Rubbing eyes is another one, sort of pulling at ears. Sometimes it's sort of noises as well. They can make sort of little noises that will often be another cue. Yawning would be your last, if you sort of hit the point where they're
Panic
yawning.
stations.
Yeah, get them into bed, as they say. Yeah, get them down as quickly as you can.
So why is sleep so important for babies and children?
So essentially, sleep is like your building block to your child's health. Like every child, even as adults, every child, every adult, every baby, they need sleep to grow. They need it to develop. It's essential for your sort of physical, your mental, and your emotional well-being. So we need your sleep to develop and grow, for your brain development as well. So when you're asleep, you rest, your brain rests. So you need that for your sleep development, or your brain development, sorry. It can also increase and develop your immune system, and down to sort of regulating your emotions and consolidating a child's memory. So sleep is kind of your building factor to how your child grows and develops.
When would you expect a baby or a child to sleep through the night? Is that a normal thing to expect for a child, or are parents potentially needing to manage their own expectations for children at different ages?
So most children will sleep through the night from around 6 months. Actually, the NHS website does say that from 6 months, realistically, a child doesn't need to be awake to have night feeds, that they can go through the night without a feed, unless obviously they are, for example, not gaining weight and they need extra feeds. But actually, from around the age of 6 months, most children should be able to sleep through the night. But this, again, it's unique to every child. Like if you've got a child that has severe eczema, for example, they may necessarily not sleep through the night, not because they can't. It could be down to that they're uncomfortable, or their skin's quite itching, so it's irritating them, which is causing them to wake. But in respect of sort of feeding and night feeds, in theory, a child should be able to go through the night from around 6 months.
There is a lot around ADHD at the moment, sort of in the media, again, like you say, social media as well, and how one of the symptoms of ADHD is struggling or minimal amounts of sleep. So do you have any advice or guidance on this?
So I mean, there is studies that do show that children that don't have enough sleep are more likely to have some sort of, or be diagnosed with some sort of behavioural disorder. But this doesn't necessarily mean that if your child doesn't sleep that they have got that sort of disorder. And it's certainly something that you need to get diagnosed beforehand. My sort of advice as a sleep consultant would be, if you do have a child, for example, that has got ADHD, to find the right support for you. So there is certain sleep consultants that will work directly and just work with children that have got behavioural disorders. Sleep training in respect of sort of a child that hasn't got a disorder to a child that has is very different. So it is right that you find the right sleep consultant that is trained in that sort of disorder to be able to get the right support. I've also seen a lot in sort of social media or Instagram videos about, I think one of the main ones I've seen is about magnesium, and if you've got a child that isn't sleeping, give them magnesium and they'll start to sleep. And I personally wouldn't recommend it. If you've got a child that isn't sleeping, a supplement like magnesium or zinc or something like that isn't just going to solve your problem. There is an underlying problem as to why they aren't sleeping. This sort of magic supplement as such isn't going to fix that. It may help, it may support them, but it isn't going to fix your whole sleep problem. And I think to find someone that you can work, I mean, I know people that do train specifically for children with behavioural needs and things like that. So it's finding the right person that is trained in that situation to be able to support you. And the sleep industry is very dysregulated. So for example, anyone can be a sleep consultant. So I think it's finding the person for you that has got the right training and can show you that they've got that training as well.
That's quite concerning, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
when you talk about magnesium, my brain automatically went to Victorian times when it was, oh, give them a little bit of gin and the child will go to sleep. This is kind of what people are using, the magnesium, the whatever, these supplements could be seen as kind of that, oh, I'll just give them that tot of something and that will help them get by and go to sleep. But if the field of sleep consultancy isn't being regulated.
And I suppose if the information and guidance can, especially nowadays with the internet, is from all over the world, there's different levels of regulation. So what's suitable in the UK and tested in the UK might not be the same as from the States or wherever. I mean, I've heard of people using all sorts of things, antihistamines to make a child drowsy, to get them to sleep. Cowpole seems to just be the cure-all. It's the something that most parents is their go-to. As you say, it is quite scary actually that there isn't that regulation and consistency really. And it's quite often preying on people being quite desperate at a stage as well.
Definitely. And there's different safe sleep advice for every country. So for the UK, what we promote as safe sleep and the advice that we give could be completely different to what is done in America, for example. And it's something I think people possibly aren't aware of in respect to the sleep industry, is that it is very dysregulated, and I've seen it on social media. Like, anyone can put out these posts and do some Google searches to find these things, and I think that can be one thing that parents do, in desperation. They'll Google, like, why is my baby not sleeping at 2 a.m? Or why am I up 5 times a night? What do I need to do? And I've had clients come to me, I've been like, we've been told to put an extra scoop in their formula to fill them up for the night so that they don't wake for a night feed. And there's so many things that I think you can be told. I think the one recently I've seen going around social media is something about the spoonful of butter. I don't know if you guys have. So it's absolutely crazy. So I remember vaguely seeing it sort of go wild on social media, that you give your child a spoonful of butter, like a teaspoonful of butter, before they go to bed, and that this promotes good sleep. And that they will sleep through the night. And there's so many of these things that, for example, like, our parents possibly in the older days, I can remember my mum sort of mentioning to me about baby rice and putting baby rice and baby porridge into the bottles. And there's all this advice that goes around, like you said, Gemma, the whiskey and the milk and things like that it is, I feel like it's almost just come on in generations now. So it's now like, okay, well, if they're not sleeping, give them some magnesium or a bit of cowpole that will help them sleep. And actually that isn't going to help them sleep. If your child isn't sleeping, there's generally an underlying reason as to why they're not sleeping, whether it's down to habit, down to your reaction, or they're not getting enough sleep in the day, or they're getting too much sleep. There's generally 9 times out of 10 there is a reason as to why your child isn't sleeping, and you need to just pick it all apart and find out what it is. No sort of supplement or cowpole or anything like that. It's in gin, or a teaspoon of butter is going to sort that. Like, you wouldn't, any parent I sort of know or I've worked with, or anyone I've said that to, like, what? Like, you can't. Why would you give a child a teaspoon of butter? Like, it's crazy.
It's something that comes up every time we do a podcast, isn't it, Ellen? Every single time we do a podcast, it comes up that you can't trust social media. What people say on social media is not the truth. That is not fact. That is not real. That's not how it should be done. And just like you say, if someone in America, Australia, Africa, wherever says do this, that does not mean it's safe or it's okay. So on that, if a parent is going, where do I seek advice from? Where would you advise a parent to go to, or practitioner, if they were struggling with certain children's sleeping? Where would you advise their first look to be?
So the first one I would go to is the Lullaby Trust. They are the foundation of sleep information, of advice. That's where, as a sleep consultant, that's where we learn all about our sleep safe advice, safe routines, safe environments. and their website it has so much information on it in respect of sleep. The NHS as well, they do have information on their website.
Do your plans always go to plan?
Touch wood so far. I haven't had a plan so far that hasn't, there's been times where we've had to tweak things and change things, but touch wood, as of all my plans have gone to plan. And again, I think a lot of it is around the right support, the right guidance, the right knowledge, and a big thing around sort of their commitment, I guess, as a parent, and their consistency. Like you have to be consistent with it if you're going to try and change some habits. Again, a bit like a diet, if you want to lose the weight, you can't sort of 10 donuts one day and a McDonald's the next day and then think, oh well, that'll be all right. Sort of You have to be consistent with it.
What are your thoughts on screen time, especially before bed?
So I am a big believer in get your children outside. Where like the outside world is incredible for a child, not just in respect of sleep, but for their their development, just everything. I personally am not the biggest fan of screen times with children. Normally I would suggest any time from your bedtime, that 2 hours before that bedtime there is no screen time whatsoever. This is purely because the blue light that's produced from screens, even like iPads, TVs, it stops the production of melatonin, which is your sleep hormone. So at a time where you're trying to increase the melatonin production, a screen will actually reduce it and will stop the production of it, which will then affect your bedtime. But also, TV programs, they're so stimulating nowadays that at a time where it's meant to be a quiet time, like relaxing, you're winding down to go to bed, actually a TV program that's quite stimulating and it is wiring up your child. And I think things like going for a walk before bed or before tea time and things like that, the fresh air will do your child the world of good before going to bed.
So is there a safe time to sleep train a child? So you sort of said after 6 months the child should be sleeping through the night. Would that be the same time that you would start thinking about sleep training? Is there children that would sleep train before that?
So for myself, I won't work with anyone with a child that's under 18 weeks or around 4 months of age. Also because they don't know the difference between night and day until they're around 4 months of age. So when you're trying to, potentially do any kind of sleep training before that, they haven't developed a circadian rhythm either. You can obviously before 18, sort of around 18 months to 4 months, 18 weeks, to 4 months, you can implement sort of safe sleep shaping habits, which can be things, for example, like putting your baby down in their cot once a day, getting them used to their sleep environment, opening your curtains in the daytime, so letting the light in to allow them to start to know the difference between day and night, and sort of, keeping daytime very loud and light and nighttime very quiet and dark. I would always say to anyone, if you've got a child that's 18 weeks or 4 months under, I wouldn't necessarily do sleep training with you, but I would be able to help you with sleep shaping habits to then be able to go on to some sort of sleep training when they're around 4 months old.
So is there a point where a child should be moved into a big boy bed, big girl bed, as we call them in nurseries, aren't they? Kind of they always come in and say, I'm in a big girl bed today. So is there a point when that should happen?
So again, sleep safe advice advises that a baby is in a room with you until they're 6 months of age. I always say to any parent, keep them in the cot for as long as you can, until obviously they're potentially at a risk, so they're starting to climb out of the cot, or they're too big for the cot, so they've sort of outgrown it. At that point, that would be when you potentially move them to a big boy bed, as they say, or a big girl bed. But again, there's I've worked with some parents that little one has started to climb up the cot, so instead they've put a big mattress on the floor, so that if they do happen to come out, they're going to go on to a soft mattress. They're not going to come to any harm. Obviously that's down to the parent's discretion if that's what they're happy doing, but I would always say keep them in their cot for as long as you possibly can, as long as they're safe. So normally I would say anything under the age of 3, just purely because they haven't got the impulse control as well, so they haven't got the sort of knowledge or the control to be able to think, I need to stay in bed. And again, I've had clients that I've worked with that have done it and been like, maybe being in a big boy bed or big girl bed will help them to sleep through and help them to sleep better. And actually it's made the situation worse because they've then been in and out of bed all night, or they're out playing with their toys in their bedroom. So I would always say, if you can and they're safe and they haven't outgrown the cot, for example, at least till the age of 3, so that they've developed that impulse control.
What advice would you give to parents if they're struggling to get children to sleep?
I think my first one to any parent is that you are doing a great job, no matter, even if your child isn't sleeping through. Motherhood, parenting, it's hard, and that actually you are doing a great job and you don't need to struggle on your own. That you can seek the support, you can seek the help, and there's nothing to be ashamed of if you do seek that support and that help. My other advice would obviously be be consistent, establish a bedtime routine. You can establish a bedtime routine realistically from the day that you come home with your baby. It doesn't have to be, bedtime, bath time, all these books. You can have a simple bedtime routine from the day that you come home from hospital if you want to. And so being consistent, establishing that bedtime routine, all about sort of creating a calm, quiet environment at that time of night. And especially for children, sort of setting some boundaries and some rules, because that can be another big thing that parents struggle with in respect of sleep. But I think my main ones would be, don't be ashamed, look for the support. And, if you need the support, it's out there. You just need to sort of reach out and find it.
From the right places.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we've already touched on. So one of our questions, or the question we like to ask all of our guests, Megan, when they come on, is what was your dream job when you were a child and why?
So funny enough, I had 2. So one, I wanted to be a vet purely because I just loved animals. And at the time of being a young child, I thought it was go to work, get to cuddle all these dogs and cats and things like that. And the reality then hit, obviously, as I got older, that it's not just all cute cuddles and fluffy animals. So and then I think the other one, funny enough, actually, and I went to college and studied for it, was to be in a public services. So I wanted to be a paramedic. And was set on that for years. I went to college, studied public services, left college and started a career in childcare, the complete opposite of, in fact, childcare was something that I was adamant I was not going to work in childcare, that it wasn't my job for me. I wasn't up for it. I had no interest in it. And the world has a funny way of showing you differently. The one job that I was adamant I wasn't going to be doing, I'm actually now
thriving
in, fully running a business in. So yeah.
Oh, lovely. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. We have loved having you. I think it's been a great conversation to have for practitioners, for parents, for us, Ellen, as well.
100%. I have got notes all around me of things that I want to go and look up and write about. It's been incredibly interesting. So really thank you for your time. I've absolutely loved this.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad you've got some stuff to go and research on that.
Ellen's got her homework.
Love it. That's my CPD done.
So thank you very much for everybody for tuning in today as well. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on the topics that we've covered and answer any questions that you might have about what we've discussed. Your input really helps what we talk about on our podcasts as well.
Don't forget to like, share and follow this podcast to stay updated. And as always, let's keep the conversation going about early years. Until next time, take care and keep making a difference.